Jesus didn't reveal everything, and that wasn't compassion, it was control. Some truth isn't dangerous because it's wrong. It's dangerous because once you understand it, you can't stay neutral. Jesus spoke in ways that confused crowds on purpose. He delayed answers. He restricted access. He let people walk away without chasing them, not because they weren't listening, but because they weren't ready for the consequences of knowing. This wasn't about hiding information. It was about timing judgment, because the moment truth is fully revealed, a decision is forced. And Jesus knew that premature clarity doesn't save people. It divides them. So the real question isn't why Jesus used parables. It's why some truths were withheld until it was too late. Truth isn't neutral. It's not just information you add to your life. Truth has weight, and weight requires capacity. But because it forces irreversible choices, once you fully understand something, you're accountable to it. There's no pretending you didn't know. That's why access mattered more than exposure. Timing mattered more than transparency. Jesus wasn't asking, can they hear this? They demand alignment. And when alignment is required, separation is inevitable. That's the framework most people miss. Jesus didn't withhold truth randomly. He released it selectively, knowing that every layer revealed would reduce the number of people willing to stay, not because the message changed, but because the cost did. If Jesus wanted clarity, parables would have been a terrible strategy. Parables don't simplify truth. They separate people based on how they approach it. To some, the stories opened meaning. To others, they closed it off completely. And Jesus knew that. He didn't use parables to help people understand. He used them to reveal who was actually seeking. Because parables do something direct statements can't. They force effort. They expose intent. They punish passivity. If you're listening casually, a parable sounds like a story. If you're listening carefully, it feels like a door that almost opens, but doesn't. That frustration is intentional. Jesus wasn't filtering intelligence. He was filtering commitment. Those who leaned in received more. Those who stayed at a distance walked away with confusion and no explanation. And when his disciples asked why he taught this way, he didn't soften it. He told them plainly that understanding wasn't given to everyone at the same time. Not because truth was scarce, but because access had conditions. Parables weren't mercy. They were a test. And most people failed it without realizing they were being tested. At one point, Jesus says something that should unsettle anyone paying attention. He tells his closest followers that there are truths he hasn't told them yet. You can't bear it yet. That line changes everything. It means truth isn't just about comprehension. It's about endurance. Some truths don't confuse people. They overload them. They collapse frameworks. They remove excuses. They force action before someone is ready to live with the consequences. Jesus understood that knowing too early doesn't protect you. It exposes you. Because once you truly understand something, ignorance is no longer an option, and neither is neutrality. You're accountable to what you know, whether you act on it or not. That's why capacity mattered. Not everyone had the same ability to absorb truth without breaking under it. Not everyone could receive it without turning defensive, hostile, or hardened. So withholding wasn't rejection. It was restraint. Jesus wasn't delaying truth because people were slow. He was delaying it because premature revelation creates resistance, not repentance. And once resistance sets in, it doesn't soften. It calcifies. That's the risk Jesus was managing. Truth delivered too early doesn't just fail to help. It locks people into opposition. They might not have chosen if given time to grow, which means something uncomfortable follows. If Jesus waited to reveal certain truths, that's the part most people miss. The disciples walked with him daily. They heard everything the crowds heard, and still, large portions of what Jesus said were left unexplained in public. Only later, and only privately, did clarity come. He operated on readiness. Some truths were too destabilizing to release publicly. Others would have triggered rejection before understanding, and some would have forced decisions that people weren't prepared to live with yet. So Jesus let confusion exist. He allowed misunderstanding to linger. He didn't rush to correct it. That alone tells you clarity was never the highest priority. Alignment was. Because once truth is fully understood, excuses disappear. You either submit to it or resist it. There's no middle ground. And Jesus wasn't interested in forcing premature decisions that would harden people against what they weren't ready to accept. That's why even the disciples struggled. They asked questions. They misunderstood. They argued about meaning, and Jesus didn't immediately resolve it for them. He let the tension remain. Not because he lacked answers, but because answers delivered too early can damage more than they heal. This is where following stops being about proximity and starts being about formation. Being near truth doesn't mean you're prepared to carry it. Jesus consistently chose timing over transparency, and that decision explains why so many people walked away. Truth released too early doesn't land as truth. It lands as threat. Jesus knew that if certain things were said plainly at the wrong moment, Jesus allowed misunderstanding to exist longer than most teachers ever would. He watched people misinterpret him because clarity forces decision, and decision creates division. The moment truth becomes unmistakable, neutrality collapses. You can't hover near it anymore. You either align with it or you move against it. And while he waited, something else happened. Pressure built. Some people leaned closer, trying to understand. Others grew frustrated, which explains something most people find uncomfortable. Jesus didn't chase those who left. He let them go. Because once truth reaches a certain point, persuasion ends. What remains isn't debate, it's judgment. And that's why withheld truth isn't passive, it's active. It creates a window. And when that window closes, outcomes diverge. Some step forward, some turn back, and some harden permanently. That's the cost of timing. And it leads directly to the final tension this episode has been circling. Because if truth was delayed on purpose, then what was it waiting for? Because the delay wasn't arbitrary. Truth wasn't being held back forever. It was being held back until a line was crossed. There were things Jesus refused to say publicly before certain events unfolded. Not because the truth would change afterward, but because once those events happened, denial would no longer be possible. What was once filtered became unavoidable. And that changes how judgment works. Because delayed truth doesn't remove accountability. It concentrates it. Everyone who walked away did so before the full weight arrived. Everyone who stayed did so without guarantees. Withheld truth wasn't about secrecy. It was about timing outcomes. And once that timing passed, there was no rewinding the decision. The next part of this story explains what changed after the delay, why truth was finally released without filters, and why judgment didn't wait any longer. Because once access is granted in full, there's no longer a place to stand in between.